one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
People will return to the people, and so long as men die, liberty will never perish. Soldiers, don't give yourselves to brutes, men who despise you, enslave you, who regiment your lives, tell you what to do, what to think, or what to feel, who drill you, diet you, treat you like cattle, use you as cannon fodder. Don't give yourselves to these unnatural men, machine men, with machine minds and machine hearts. You are not machines, you are not cattle, you are men, you are men, you are men.
Welcome to the Rock Worldwide Show here on WSHO Sunshine 800 AM. I am your host. Sorry to the internet feed there. Had a little cough. Still trying to shake this cough. The family's been coughing and sneezing and sorry about that. Welcome to the program. We're going to jump into this. This is the Rock Worldwide Show here on WSHO Sunshine 800 AM. And again, I am Trey Roberts. And if you want to be a part of the program, you can give us a call to 504-527-0800. You can also go to WSHO.com. Jump into the chat room there. WSHO.com. Jump into the chat room there. And off we go. All right, let's see here. Welcome YN and the 3 other viewers that are in the chat room already. So, lots to get to. Last week I issued you a challenge. I don't know if any of you did it or not, but I begged you to stay off of social media and the news and just come here. You'll see why. Today we have a huge program in store for you. Lots of news, so we're not even going to hesitate. We're going to get in, and we're going to start off with the biggest story of the week. Johnny Depp versus Amber Heard. That's right. Johnny Depp won his huge defamation lawsuit against his ex-wife, Amber Heard. Now, Amber Heard became the face of the Me Too movement. She accused him of domestic abuse, and now she owes him about $10 million. Now, the mainstream press, they're trying to spin this as if they both lost, because Depp was in fact ordered to pay $2 million to Heard for defamation as well. But this win is huge for him, and it could ultimately force her into bankruptcy. Now, the fateful article, which Heard published in the Washington Post in 2018, we learned in the course of the case that it had been written, in part at least, by the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union. And it was written by them in exchange for a promised $3.5 million donation from Heard. Now, this was the frothy peak, if you will, of the Me Too movement. Heady times when all of liberal America decided to root out all sexual malfeasance. You know, or at least the kind that happen among rich people. At workplaces like McDonald's, not so much. Terrible people were rightly taken down. But also, bad dates became recast somehow as sexual assault. Every morning that a woman woke up feeling shame turned into the equivalent of a sexual assault or a rape. Every morning brought another news alert of a famous man disgraced or resigning some high post. Rumor and innuendo and thinly sourced stories became the name of the game back then. And to be honest, Heard's particular piece, for a lot of people, never struck them as even close to the most egregious. There was an article by a lady named Moriah Donegan, and she had she was keeping up this thing called a poopy media men, but it was the S word for poopy. And it was a list. And it was a list that accused random men of rape. Rape wins on that front. Now, the case against her, brought by Stephen Elliott, looks like it'll go to trial. So in this particular trial, evidence emerged of Heard contradicting herself in places where she didn't need to contradict herself. But in places like, example, she said she had no idea that paparazzi would be there to photograph a bruise as she left the court after filing a temporary restraining order. But then the former TMZ employee that took the stand said that he had been tipped off, and Heard herself had testified to that tip-off in her deposition. So she had clearly, publicly declared that she had donated $7 million of her divorce settlement, and then tried to say that a pledge was the same as a donation. She denied pooping in her marital bed. But, well, now look at it. Now, it takes a lot to lose a defamation trial in America. But to that jury, Heard became a very unreliable narrator. There was a deeply unsavory bit about Depp, his nightmarish texts fantasizing about hurting Heard for starters, his addictions. He came off really as a man who, while they were together, they were booze-addled and angry, and by the time Kate Moss showed up on the Zoom from Gloucestershire, it was a high-octane celebrity circus, and no one was looking good, except Moss, of course. But the best summary of why exactly Heard lost came from criminal defense attorney turned YouTube personality Natalie Whittingham Burrell. She calls herself Natalie the Lawyer Chick, and she broke it all down beat by beat. Some surprising people have come to Depp's defense. Among them, feminist hero Ayaan Hirsi Ali. More predictably, conservatives have embraced Depp as a man who defeated the #MeToo insanity, even though he's definitely not a GOP ally. And much of the establishment left has embraced Heard as a wronged woman, except TikTok-obsessed kids who actually went very pro-Depp. And we're not really sure what to make of them yet, but is this kind of like a vibe shift that we're seeing? But here's sort of the upshot as I see it. People took a lot of crap for warning against the excesses of the Me Too movement and the nonsense of #BelieveAllWomen. But this is exactly why caution was needed. This is why people, journalists especially, need to be meticulous before putting huge allegations into the public sphere. Now we're into the lawsuits that in retrospect were inevitable. And Depp's surely won't be the last one. Heard's lawyers say they will definitely appeal this decision, but who knows? Not every... The courtroom, our legal system in the courtroom, for all of its flaws, if Kyle Rittenhouse hadn't been given a chance to go to court, he'd be in prison today. If Johnny Depp hadn't had the court system to be able to sue for defamation, he would just forever be known as a domestic abuser of his wife. If people are not allowed to go to court and have their day in court, justice cannot be served. We still must strive to be a nation of laws and not a nation of men. Well, as many of you know now, and not too much of our likings, this is Pride Month. Now, there's some interesting things going on. I'm bringing up Pride Month right now because I'm not in support of it, primarily because if the LGBTQ community has told us now for several years that nothing about their lifestyle brings about shame to them, then I'm sort of with Douglas Murray in the idea that if nothing about the LGBTQ lifestyle should be shameful to them, then at the same time, what about the LGBTQ lifestyles should you be prideful about? I mean, it's sort of ridiculous, but really what Pride is turning into, Pride Month, is it's really just a bunch of straight liberals with non-traditional haircuts, more or less needing a holiday for themselves. There's a lot of LGBTQ people that I know, that I follow on social media, and they're kind of like Morgan Freeman on Black History Month. They don't want a special month. They think it's kind of ridiculous. They point out, these famous marches like in Chicago where you have a woman dancing on top of a cop car with the words ACAB on top of it, where all cops are basically children without fathers, shall we say. You have burning Israeli flags. So uniformed gay cops aren't allowed in these pride marches in most of the big cities in America. And Jewish stars can't be flown in some of the marches because Judaism is about Israel and Zionism is racism, so no Jewish stuff allowed. Because it's all very inclusive, you see. But to honor Pride Month, there's an interesting first-person account. And the title of the article is, "I am queer and proud even though I'm now married to a man." Wait, what? And there's this new study that finds that 50% of the LGBT, okay, now check this out. The lesbians, if you take them all, the lesbians, the gays, the bisexuals, and the transgenders, if you combine their ranks, just the L, the G, the B, and the T, they are 50% of that group is bisexual. Okay, so 50% of the LGBT are made up of Bs. Okay? Now, over 50% of people who identify as Bs are self-reporting that they are in monogamous, heterosexual lifestyles. Okay, so think about that. Half of LGBT is B, and over half of B are in exclusive heterosexual relationships. So that means that half of LGBT are basically straight white females. Even the U.S. Marines have gotten into the mix. They posted something on Twitter this week, which I think is really worthy of being made fun of. They posted a helmet. The United States Marine Corps posted a helmet with gay flag bullets. I don't even understand what the Marine Corps is doing. I mean, people thought that it was kind of sick to coat the bullets in pork fat in some sort of way when we were out there. They thought it would, it was funny to do that when we were talking about going to war against radical Islam, and that to somehow prevent these Muslim terrorists from ever making it into paradise and dying for the sake of Allah, which of course is a complete mischaracterization of the belief system of most law-abiding, the overwhelming majority of Islamic believers. But all of that is just to say that, like, something is changing, because all of the rest of the beyond, the Q and beyond, the Q plus 2AA Tree Spirit movement, like, the majority of these people are actually in relationships that otherwise just makes them straight. The overwhelming majority of the LGBTQ plus 2AA Moon Spirit, Tree Spirit movement is basically straight white liberals. So we don't have to necessarily genuflect to an agenda. We don't have to have a knee-jerk reaction to what these people are doing, because at the end of the day, this is the tattoo and the piercing movement of the 70s and 80s, what we're seeing with gender fluidity right now. I'm going to come back to some gender fluidity stuff because there was a big story that happened this week. We'll get to that in a second. I don't know if you've been keeping up with Amazon. Obviously, we buy and use Amazon on a regular basis, but a few dozen Amazon employees right now are staging a quote-unquote die-in. They're protesting where they are laying down on the street because the company sells Common Sense. And shout out, by the way, to Common Sense and the Honesty Podcast and the whole media conglomerate over there at Common Sense with Barry Weiss. Their contribution to this show is overwhelmingly appreciated. But Common Sense friend Abigail Schreier, her book is sold still at Amazon. So a few dozen Amazon employees are staging a die-in right now. Now this book by Abigail Schreier, by the way, is a book about how adolescent girl gender transitions are being in part, ready, brace yourself for this, it's a social trend. It's not a psychopathy. It's not even a mental illness in the traditional sense of the word. But these employees seem to have no problem when their company partners with the Chinese Communist Party propaganda arm to, among other things, remove negative reviews from a film called Amazing China. No die-in for the Uyghurs. None for the Amazon warehouse workers. But when you come for teenage mastectomies, oh, you better watch out. You better watch out. Now, Russiagate is something that we will probably never hear completely about. But this week, Hillary Clinton's former campaign lawyer, Michael Sussman, as everyone knows now, was acquitted in a case that accused him of lying to the FBI. And it's technically a win for the Clintons. Though during the trial, it was revealed that while running for president, Hillary Clinton herself approved the disseminating of the conspiracy that Trump had a secret link to the Russian bank called Alpha Bank. Now, as we all know, there were plenty of idiots out there who really believed that the Steele dossier and all of the rest of what we were reading and hearing reported back in 2016 and 17 was true. But pretty much all of that now has been debunked. And if you want to really if you really want some good information from a writer that you can really trust on the matter, Matt Taibbi has publicly came out and apologized, but he's written one of the smartest pieces on the Sussman trial that I've read so far throughout this whole process, and what his acquittal means, and rehashing tidbits of the Russiagate that had quickly been pushed under the rug along the way. Probably the most damning piece of information that came out, and this is written in Taibbi's piece, is, quote, the Democratic National Committee and the Clinton campaign recently agreed to pay a $113,000 fine to the Federal Elections Commission for concealing their role in producing the Steele research, close quote. Let me repeat that. The DNC and the Clinton campaign produced the only real piece of evidence that Trump colluded with Russia. No other, not the Mueller trial, the Mueller investigation, not the FBI, not Comey, not the Obama or the Trump DOJ, not Bill Barr, nothing, no one, except the Hillary Clinton campaign, and that's why they've had to pay a $113,000 fine. Huge swaths of America, like the White House press secretary, still believe that 2016 was illegitimate and that Trump was a Russian plant. It's important to know the truth of what happened back then. And it'll be a while before that reckoning, though, because of the phenomenon that I'd like to introduce to you today, something known as time laundering. Time laundering. This is something that we've seen. Something that we've seen probably going all the way back to like Hands Up, Don't Shoot and Michael Brown. Time laundering is kind of like when you get a present that you don't want, but you can't return it. And you can't really give it away without offending the person that gave it to you. And so there's something that, like, I know we've done in the past. I know it's been done to us. And I call it time laundering. So what you do is you get a gift, you don't want it, you can't return it, you can't give it back. So you leave the item in the box and you put it into a closet for a year, maybe 2. Maybe if it's from like your mom, who you love very much, then maybe you hold on to it for like 3 years. And when enough time has passed, you can look at the item and you can be like, oh my gosh, you know what? I forgot. It's been 3 years. I've never worn this. I've never used this. I never even opened this. You know what? I'm just going to give it to a friend, or I'm going to give it to Goodwill. And you can pretty much do it guilt-free. And this is kind of how the American mainstream news handles the most interesting stories of the day when they happen to be inconvenient to the prevailing narrative. The best example of this is the Hunter Biden laptop, which was only allowed in right-wing media and was declared fake news until it wasn't, but not until 18 months after it even mattered. Or disinformation, which was delineated by God and could never be questioned, until the conservative press had loosened up the jar and the topic could be looked upon. And there really are endless examples. I mean, we could do episodes of shows on the examples of time laundering. But there's 2 that happened this week. Harper's can now safely bring us this skeptical piece about COVID controls, maybe, kind of, sort of, also maybe being about social control. Now, years in, after all of the socially risky reporting done by very bad people, the New York Times can now bring us a thoughtful and smart piece on Lia Thomas and trans athletes. Now, these ideas have been gently tumbled, if you will, on the delicate cycle, in the time laundry machines. And those who did the dirty work of breaking these stories? Well, those who didn't want the appropriate number of years? Shh. The New Yorker just dropped, apparently, I don't know if you knew this or not, but just between you and me, Bill Clinton apparently went on Jeffrey Epstein's plane. Welcome to the party, New Yorker. Be careful when you take those delicates out of the dryer. They'll be a little warm. Now, you know, Joe Biden said that inflation was going to be his priority. And I'm not sure that this really screams inflation is my priority, but the march toward a massive student loan forgiveness plan continues, and Biden is indicating that $10,000 in forgiveness is coming. Now, this is going to cost Americans, you and I and other tax-paying Americans, it's going to cost us around $230 billion. It's a handout from those who paid off their loans or who never went to college to people with high incomes and too many degrees. That happens to be the very group who staffs the Biden White House, and it's the core Biden voter at this point. Now, the main fight is between the left that wants $50,000 of debt forgiveness and every student and Biden who is only proposing $10,000. Quote, interest will undo that $10,000 fast. We can do better, close quote, said the Honorable Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez this week. An NAAC president called $10,000, quote, a bucket of ice water on a forest fire, close quote. What's interesting now is just how little Biden seems to care about what his policies are doing to deepen our current inflation. Well, I don't know who it is, and neither does anybody publicly yet, but I would recommend the Supreme Court leaker. They probably ought to be lawyering up right about now. The Supreme Court apparently didn't really love it. It wasn't really their thing when a clerk leaked the draft of Roe v. Wade and that pre-decision. And officials now are with inside of the Supreme Court, what they're doing and have done now is they're asking for the clerk's phone records, but they're also asking for signed affidavits. Now, do you understand that if a clerk signs an affidavit saying they did not leak, which, by the way, the leak is not technically a federal law. It is not the breaking of a federal law. But if you sign an affidavit saying that you didn't break a federal law, and it comes to find out that you did break a federal law, or excuse me, you did leak, the fact that you signed the affidavit saying you didn't leak, that's lying to a federal investigation, and that is a felony and punishable as a crime. So lawyer up if you're the clerk that leaked the draft, and because they're coming for you. Here's a piece of good news for those of us who love the idea of school vouchers. The Washington Post is reporting this week that the Supreme Court is not only going to drop a bombshell on Roe v. Wade, but they're also going to drop a voucher bombshell, likely allowing state-funded vouchers to be used at private religious schools. Nothing has given the school choice movement wings better than the Public School Teachers Union and local school boards, and they've apparently spent 2 years arguing that what public schools do is just babysitting, and there's no such thing as learning loss because nothing the school does can or should be measured. So during the pandemic, Americans, the ones who didn't start homeschooling, became very, very pro-school choice. Ooh, bring the bombshell, Supreme Court. Bring it. Bring it, bring it, bring it. Please give choice. Let's get our kids out of public education. Have you ever heard the phrase girl boss? I got a girl boss update for you. This week, Sheryl Sandberg, she is decided to step down from Facebook. I'm just not going to call it Meta yet. She decided to step down from Facebook. She also gave an interview to People magazine for some perfect reason. Also this week, Emily Weiss, who created direct-to-consumer skincare and makeup company Glossier, shifted from CEO to executive chairwoman of the board. Cue the coverage about the death of the girl boss here. The Times ran a story about Weiss that has to be read to be believed, and we're told again and again and again how gross it is that women do business things without also being anti-capitalist leaders. Like, so if you have basically a uterus and you're making a paycheck, then you should also be doing communist revolution stuff. And needless to say that no male business leader is ever going to be written about in this sort of way. There is much criticism being levied right now at the Uvalde police chief, Pete Arredondo. He is the police chief of the Uvalde Consolidated Independent School District Police Department. It appears as though he has stopped responding to the Texas Rangers who are working on an investigation, although Arredondo disputes this. Now, separately, the Justice Department has launched a federal review into the Uvalde Police Department and what went wrong that day. Much to the chagrin of many people who are very pro-police officer, there does appear that a lot went wrong, and we need to know why. And if, as people like Bill Maher of Real Time says, if we have a generation right now of police officers, and I don't believe this to be the case, but if we have a generation of police officers who are scared to run into the face of danger, especially when kids' lives are on the line, then get out of the police department. Just honorably, quietly leave. We need police officers. We need to make police great again. And I know that they've been demonized and they've been ostracized and they've been defunded in a lot of ways. But here locally, I believe John Bel Edwards approved LaToya the Destroyer's bonus plan for the NOPD. So we'll see. They might be getting a little bit more money. Hopefully that may attract more and better police officers here locally. But whatever went wrong, if there was police error, if there was Border Patrol tactical team error, they need to be held responsible. It's possible that like kids just sat there for 40 minutes after being shot and bled out and died and could have been rescued. There's a lot still to be found out, but I'm all for investigating what happened and holding those accountable that need to be held accountable. Speaking of being held accountable, you gotta love California Highway Patrol. I don't think it's much of anyone's business that Paul Pelosi, House Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi's husband, had a little bit too much to drink. Missed the stop sign. Got into a fender bender with another car. But there's one bit that's amazing to note. He stayed on the scene. Good job. And he was arrested for the DUI. Very well done. But our politicians and our police aren't always great. But in so many places around the world, the spouse of a high-ranking public official just wouldn't be arrested in this situation. But in Napa, California, there, a drunk Pelosi is just a drunk guy named Paul. And he gets arrested, just like everyone else. Will they drop the charges? Will he be prosecuted? Will it ultimately be? I don't know. But he's got an arrest record. He's the House Speaker's husband. He's incredibly wealthy. But he got a DUI for driving drunk and getting into a fender bender. So kudos to the Napa, California Highway Patrol people. Staying in California, Venice, California. My daughter and I, we went to California about 2 years ago. And we got to see Venice Beach, and we got to see just the Pacific Ocean and so many beautiful areas south of Anaheim. It was just really great. We snuck into some of these neighborhoods that are just unbelievably gorgeous. And one of the prettiest neighborhoods in the country has been turned into what is basically now just an open-air drug fair. Anyone who walks around the area knows that the situation has nothing to do with high rent. It's fentanyl. It's a drug-induced psychosis, and the city's refusal to do anything about it. This week, one of the residents of a Venice campground asked another resident to keep the noise down, and the camper shot him in the leg. Meanwhile, in Chicago, a well-known and well-liked homeless man was lit on fire randomly by a jerk who felt like doing it. This man's not expected to survive. But it's ridiculous as to what, if you get a chance to check out some of the clips of Real Time, Douglas Murray and Michael Schallenberger were the guest of Bill Maher on Real Time yesterday. Michael Schallenberger was a extreme Democratic progressive growing up as a teenager and a young 20-something adult. He's running for governor in California. He's got a real shot. He considers himself progressive in his compassion to help people, libertarian in his love for freedom, and conservative in that our major institutions, including things like the rule of law, need to be preserved in order to protect freedom and compassion for those who need help. He's running an amazing campaign. He's written some amazing books. If you get a chance, go check that out. If you like what you see and hear from him, he's super smart. And he's basically running to fix the homeless problem in California, because it's a civilization issue that he's more or less running on. Al Jazeera, the U.S. news version of Al Jazeera, which is called AJ+, this week came out with a new question for readers. Should, quote, by the way, should white people be allowed to adopt black and brown children, close quote. Yes, that's a discussion now. We're so close to seeing an American left that outright argues against interracial marriage. I mean, the left is so close to arguing for separate but equal, to arguing for a type of segregation, for arguing against interracial marriage. They're now arguing against interracial adoption. And we can be trans everything, it seems like, but we can't be transracial. A completely socially made up construct. If you keep up with the squad, that's AOC and Rashida Talib and Ilhan Omar, those crazy wackadoos from the Democrat Party, but Bakari Sellers, keep up with her. She is, I think Bakari is a woman. I can neither confirm nor deny this. Bakari Sellers is trying to oust squad member Rashida Talib with a new PAC, a political action committee, that's ready to spend $1 million on the fight. The plan for the new PAC is to find candidates who can win in diverse communities and who are also not anti-Semitic, like squad members are. So, keep up with that. It looks like China is moving some of its work, or rather Apple is moving some of its work out of China. So, some of its iPad manufacturing, they're going to move out of China. But they're moving it to Vietnam, so don't get too excited. They're not bringing it back to the U.S. yet. Now, this isn't spurred by some sort of moral awakening from the Cupertino-based giant, but rather just that the misery and destruction of China's COVID lockdowns have got in the way of production. So I think we should all take this as a little bit as a win, and where we can take victories, let's take the victories. It also looks like China could be losing its grip on our movies. Tom Cruise's movie this week, or this last 2 weeks or whatever, the new Top Gun sequel, a company called Tencent Holdings pulled out of funding the new Top Gun movie, and in doing so, a flag for Taiwan was reinstated on Tom Cruise's leather jacket. Also, we should probably take this one as a small win as well. And speaking of winning, Lia Thomas is actually planning to go to the Olympics. Now, listen, she's going to swim for the U.S. So, although I'm not a big fan of her swimming against college women, I'm kind of mixed on whether or not how I feel about her swimming against other countries' women. Like, if the International Olympic Committee, the IOC, is going to let a man hop in the pool and swim against other women of other countries, and she swims for the United States of America, God bless America. I mean, look, we're just pulling for the U.S. at the Olympics, right? I mean, the Olympics are basically a joke now. Now, I guess I would be upset if Lia Thomas takes the place of some woman, but chances are the person she's going to take the place of wouldn't probably win anyway. So I don't know how I feel about this. This is what she said this week. Quote, "It's been a goal of mine to swim at Olympic trials for a very long time, and I would love to see that through." Close quote. Thomas, who competed for years as a pretty good collegiate male swimmer, stands a strong chance of achieving this dream now as an absolute killer female swimmer. Caitlyn Jenner, probably the most famous trans athlete, has slammed Thomas for doing this. Those on the other side continue to argue that male puberty has little to no impact on athletic performance, and say things along the line as, well, there's no short men and tall women, so, there's short men and there's tall women, so who's to say? Now, my favorite chart is this one from Emma Hilton. It shows Laurel Hubbard, a biological male, who then began competing as a female weightlifter. The orange line is the women's lift total over the years, and teal is the men's. And so if you look at this, just type in men 35 and women 35 Olympic weightlifting lifts, and you'll see this, that women haven't even hit the 200-pound mark yet, the 200-kilogram mark yet. Men are approaching 400 kilograms. And Laurel Hubbard is approaching 300 kilograms. I love when the media has to make corrections, and two great corrections this week came out. As a reporter who has gotten plenty of embarrassing corrections, it brings me no pleasure to have to report on them. But this week there are two huge missteps that tell a story. And not just one about media companies wanting to avoid lawsuits. The BBC admitted that they're reporting about J.K. Rowling, the famous author of and super wealthy woman, female author of the Harry Potter and the Fantastic Beasts series. They're reporting this week and admitting that their reporting was potentially misleading. That they called her views on gender, quote, very unpopular opinions, close quote, when in fact, it's not really true. And then the Daily Beast officially apologized to Hunter Biden's laptop repairman. Yes, they finally admitted that the laptop wasn't, quote unquote, stolen, as they had tried to claim for a brisk 2 years. Quote, an earlier version of this story mistakenly referred to Hunter Biden's laptop as stolen. We have removed that word, and we apologize to Mr. Mac Isaac for the error, close quote. And this is what the editors wrote. Listen, rape is not a funny concept, and so I'm not attempting to make light of anyone who has been raped. But I'm sorry, you're just a silly person if you're out there claiming that you were raped by a woman. The BBC again altered the quotes from a rape victim so that she no longer referred to her assailant as a him. That was a female penis that was doing the raping. And in other news, female inmates in California are coming forward about a biological male who identifies as a woman and so is housed in the women's prison and who raped a fellow prisoner. That the most vulnerable people in the world, incarcerated women, are made to handle this and shunned for speaking out is one of the worst things that I believe that I've heard. Think about this, ladies and gentlemen. Jesus said that when you visited me in prison, you will enter into my bliss. And the righteous asked Jesus, when did we visit you in prison? And he said, when you've done this to the least of these, my brethren. And so here are women in prison, and they're putting men in there, and these men are assaulting them only because they identify as women. Are they allowed to be in there? Now this week, I don't know if you heard, but What is a Woman came out. It's the new docu-movie, if you will, put on by the Daily Wire, Ben Shapiro's group over there, specifically from Matt Walsh. Where if a person says, if a biological man, a biological male who has sperm as his gametes, wants to identify as a woman, then you ask that person, what is that? And he says, a woman. And you say, yeah, what's a woman? And he says, a woman is anyone who wants to identify as a woman. And you say, I know. What are you identifying as? What is a woman? If they define a woman as a biologically female human being with eggs as her sex gametes, then it shows you that a man can never, a person can never identify as a biological woman, and their entire house of cards comes down. I highly recommend, if you haven't seen the movie, check it out. I watched it this week. It was great. And just if you ever get into these conversations, just ask someone. So you think anyone can identify as a woman, do you? Yes. Well, tell me what that is. Well, what do you mean? What is a woman? Well, a woman is anyone who wants to identify as a woman. No, that's circular reasoning. You can't say, what is a woman? Anyone who wants to identify as a woman. Well, what is a woman? Anyone who wants to identify as a woman. Well, what's a woman? You just keep going round and round. If you say, I want to identify as a cat, can you define a cat? Oh, well, that's a species of, you could go genus, species, you could do that whole thing. Feline, furry, four-legged creature, purrs, meows, claws, the whole nine. Okay, so what's a woman? If you get them to define what is a woman, and you keep it as simple as it's a biological female human being. Well, then that lets you know right there. The whole thing breaks down. Now, you will be called, if you're a woman and you go through this little mental thing that I just did with you, you will be called a TERF, a trans-exclusive radical feminist. But Queen Elizabeth appears to have given the Queen's Award. Now, this is a sign of a really big shift within the culture wars. The British Empire Medal was awarded to the founder of a watchdog group focused on medicalized childhood gender transitions. Stephanie Davies Arai, who has done terrible things like arguing that kids might not know entirely who they are by age 11, horrible woman, is now being honored by the Queen for her efforts to safeguard children. Also to the Queen, happy Platinum Jubilee, whatever the heck that means. Now, I don't know if you know this or not, but some math classes, they're just harder than others. So in wish fulfillment news, Stanford education professor Joe Bowler tried to argue this week that Harvard regards, quote, as equal, high school data science, computer science, stats, and calculus. So kids don't need to worry about any of that, and it's okay that states like California are working to keep kids away from advanced math classes. The co-director of undergrad studies at Harvard's computer science program responded, appalled, thank goodness, quote, these courses are not all equal. If you want to see more diverse students in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, the worst advice you can give them is that high school data science is just as good as calculus, close quote. One of the things that we're seeing now as a result of COVID lockdowns is we now know that kids coming out of public schools just don't know anything. We're basically promoting these kids socially through and giving kids who show up for the required number of days, we're giving them diplomas. And it's really sad. We need to get back to what school and education was for, so that kids could finish school and know things. There's been some phenomenal videos posted that basically do the whole jaywalking skit that used to be done when Jay Leno would do his Man on the Street segment. And it's scary how poor these young people answer or don't answer these questions. I saw something really, really horrible this week. There was a video that was going around from Joel Fisher. And Joel Fisher says that in his Do Not Comply Twitter account, he posted a Twitter, and his tweet said, just another day in New York City's safest subway system where innocent people are being harassed and assaulted, but the mayor wants you to ride the subway instead of driving to save the environment. Of all the viral scenes of New York subway violence, man, this one really stuck out to me. In the video, it shows a man grabbing a woman's hair, yanking her around, and then finally releasing her. And all of the people on the subway are just trying to ignore it. Now, there obviously are safety concerns. The guy could be armed, and I guess people would rather this woman suffer than to risk their lives intervening, but no one even yells stop to him. There's a creepy, docile energy, as though everyone on the train is mostly worried about getting in social trouble for even witnessing a crime. Or maybe they just care about getting home. I don't know. Last story, looks like Netflix is becoming unleashed. Now that they've done their layoffs, i.e. firing all the activist leaders, Netflix put out their Ricky Gervais special. A lot of bad language in it. I wouldn't recommend it. But in support of free speech, many critics have slammed it, and the audiences have loved it. According to most reports, It's pretty demure. There's a few beats of gender jokes in it, and then a lot of unrelated British body humor. But it's just funny to me now that like symbolic people like Dave Chappelle and Ricky Gervais have become more or less like the people, and how charged it is to even really speak their names in public. The one-time CEO of Twitter, Jack Dorsey, tweeted out just a link to the special. Only a link, no comment on it. And at this point, doing something like this is a little like giving the woke fist emoji once was. It's like, yeah, I'm bad. I'm edgy as all get out. Ricky Gervais, you bet I said it. Next, he's going to be posting, links to the Rock Worldwide show. I don't know. Maybe, and I would support Dorsey's nod, and I would say back to him, Ricky Gervais, to you too, brother. Just taking a look at the chat room real quick. Let's see here. Going back here. Seven said, so the alphabet people are now accepted in most areas. I don't know. I don't know if they're accepted. I don't know if they were ever not accepted. That's the whole thing about the movement. Seven. Thinker said, most Judeo-Christianity hates this verse. 1 John 2:23. Whosoever denies the Son does not have the Father also. Donald said, people are getting shot, driven on I-10 almost daily now. Donald also said, neighbor had a blowout on I-10, called for AAA for a tow, and discovered that he had a large caliber bullet in his tire. Didn't even hear all of this on the news until now. It's just normal here. Thinker said, Trey, the left pushes race mixing and multiculturalism. However, God's law is that he created kind after kind and told them to multiply kind after kind. The word kind and species are synonymous. Mixing the gene pool brought down God's wrath in Genesis 6. Yeah, but he brought down the gene pool by a divine human hybridization. So no, race mixing is not, and multiculturalism is not. He has, from the beginning, wanted to save the nations. Let's not get racist. Looking at the social media context, let's see here. Stop it. She is a he. Thank you, Stephanie Roberts. Talking about Lia Thomas. Lia Thomas is a he. I'm just trying to be polite, Stephanie Roberts. Don't be such a meanie, mean. Man, that's Stephanie Roberts, boy, I tell you. All right. That's going to pretty much do it for us today. So hopefully, let me see here. Hopefully you, coming up next on WSHO here on Sunshine 800 AM, Issues and Answers with Elder Mike Indes. So don't go anywhere for that. And hopefully we will be here again with you, same time next week, 11 a.m. Central Standard Time, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and of course at WSHO. Thank you for those in the chat room. Thank you for those watching online. We will see you next time here on the Rock Worldwide Show. Remember, as always, oppose progressivism wherever it rears its ugly head. Illuminate the light of truth.